Picture this. It's 1970. The air is thick with rubber smoke and gasoline dreams. The streets are a battleground of torque and thunder. The muscle car wars are at their peak. Every stoplight is a drag strip, and every teenager with a part-time job dreams of dropping a big block into a Chevelle or a Mustang. The muscle car wars are in full swing. Everyone's talking about the Hemi, the LS6, the Boss 429. These were the headline names. The cars that starred in ads rumbled down Woodward Avenue and burned their place into American automotive folklore. But while America was lost in its obsession with mainstream legendary names, there was a silent beast lurking in the shadows. Today we're uncovering the hidden story behind the Oldsmobile Rocket 455 V8, the forgotten masterpiece that could have changed everything. A silent beast that never quite got the recognition it deserved. Oldsmobile engineers were quietly developing something that would transform the automotive world. An engine so potent in performance that it should have been a household name. Instead, it has morphed into a brand people today only think of as their grandfather's car. If you've ever rooted for the underdog, if you believe the best engines are the ones with stories worth telling, and if you love a little rebellion under the hood, then buckle up, because this isn't just a history lesson, it's a resurrection, Act 1. The accidental birth of a legend, the raw truth. Rocket 455 didn't come to being as an intentional decision. Oldsmobile had first accidentally invented the muscle car with the Rocket 88, which was the first intermediate with a powerful V8. The Rocket engine used an overhead valve V8 design rather than the flathead straight 8 design which prevailed at the time. It was lighter, more powerful, more efficient, and it absolutely ripped. The Rocket 88 was a hit with hot rodders and racers. Its performance shocked the industry. It even dominated NASCAR. And just like that, Oldsmobile had built what many consider to be the first true muscle car, almost 2 decades before the term would even exist. The Rocket V8 laid the foundation for everything that would follow. And yet, Oldsmobile still didn't lean into performance. It flirted with it, danced around it, but never embraced it the way Pontiac did with the GTO. Enter the Rocket 425 in 1965. 385 horsepower of pure fury that somehow only made it into luxury cars. Imagine that power placed in a Toronado when it should have been terrorizing drag strips. Rocket 425 was power trapped in the wrong body, but 1968 changed everything. The 425 was retired, and there was growing demand for high-performance cars and escalating competition within GM. Something was shifting in the American car industry. The post-war boom had fueled a nationwide appetite for more than just transportation. People wanted speed, power, and wanted to make a statement at every stoplight. After years of quietly building stronger and more refined V8s like the 394 and the 425, Oldsmobile engineers were sitting on a secret weapon, and in 1968, they unleashed it. The Rocket 455 V8. At a time when most performance engines were built for top-end horsepower, Oldsmobile's 455 had a different mission. It was built for torque, that ground-shaking, tire-shredding force that launched you off the line and pinned you to your seat, and that made it different from nearly everything else on the road. And so the 425 was replaced with a legend, same basic architecture of the 425, but with a longer stroke. Here's something to understand. Rocket 455 came alive at the time of engine bans on intermediate cars, so it only went into enormous rides, where its performance potential was limited by simple, awful power-to-weight ratios. This engine should have rewritten the narrative around Oldsmobile. It should have launched the brand into the center of the muscle car universe. But Oldsmobile's past, its quiet reputation, its luxury-first image, worked against it. Most people didn't expect performance from Oldsmobile, and even fewer were paying attention. Oldsmobile's Rocket V8 engine was the leader in performance. With the fastest cars on the market, the numbers alone tell the story. 455 cubic inches of displacement, massive even by 1960s standards. The secret was in the bore and stroke combination. At 4.126 inches bore and 4.25 inches stroke, this was a long stroke design that prioritized torque over peak horsepower. The result? An engine that could literally twist chassis and break axles with its low-end grunt. While other big blocks like Chevrolet's LS 6454 or Mopar's 426 Hemi were often tuned for peak horsepower, the Olds 455 was tuned for drivability and durability. It could haul a massive luxury coupe or surprise a GTO at a stoplight. It didn't matter what gear you were in, you floored it and it went. By the 1970s and 1980s, Oldsmobile could walk with shoulders high and boast of the results of this revolutionary powerhouse. Sales soared to an all-time high with positive reviews from critics on the perceived quality and reliability. By this time, Olds had displaced Pontiac and Plymouth as the third best-selling brand in the U.S. behind Chevrolet and Ford. In the late 1970s and again in the mid-1980s, model year production topped 1 million units, something only Chevrolet and Ford had achieved. So now you know, Oldsmobile wasn't some sleepy brand that stumbled into a great engine. It had been innovating since day one. It had created the first mass-produced car. It had launched the first overhead valve V8 in a production car, and it had accidentally invented the muscle car in 1949. The Rocket 455 wasn't a fluke. It was legacy fulfilled. But the world wasn't ready for them, and General Motors, they weren't ready to let Oldsmobile outshine the rest of the family. What happened next would turn a performance powerhouse into one of the most overlooked engines in American history. Act 2. The cars that carried the legend. The Rocket 455 was the result of 4 years of development on the Olds big block V8. It's no surprise then that when it was introduced, it had some big shoes to fill. The Rocket 455 wasn't just an engine. It was the beating heart behind some of the most unexpected, unconventional, and unforgettable vehicles of the muscle car era. Let's explore the cast of characters that carried the Rocket 455 into the annals of American car history. The 442. Oldsmobile's performance flagship. You can't talk about the Rocket 455 without talking about the Oldsmobile 442. By 1968, the 442 emerged as a standalone model built on Oldsmobile's chassis. Redesigned with new sheet metal and a slightly shorter wheelbase, the model underwent a significant transformation. Oldsmobile sidestepped the restriction by claiming Hurst was the integrator of the engine. The result? A head-turning, rocket-powered machine finished in Peruvian silver with striking black accents, immediately becoming one of the most sought-after versions in the lineup. Every 1974 42 came standard with the Rocket 455 V8. And for those who wanted more, Olds offered the W30 Performance Package, a factory hot rod that turned the 442 into one of the fiercest muscle cars on the market. The W30 package further enhanced performance through lightweight components, low-restriction exhausts, and advanced induction systems. This wasn't just about horsepower, it was about engineering excellence, turning a heavyweight muscle car into a straight-line monster. The Oldsmobile Toronado. Now here's where things get weird, in the best way. The Oldsmobile Toronado wasn't a muscle car, it was a front-wheel drive luxury coupe, introduced in 1966 as a design and engineering marvel. But when the Rocket 455 arrived in 1968, it became standard equipment in the Toronado, and suddenly you had a 4,500-pound land yacht that could smoke the front tires from a stoplight. The 455 debuted in the 1968 Oldsmobile Toronado. Toronado was a luxury car produced by Oldsmobile, a front-wheel drive personal luxury car. The Rocket 455 gave the large, heavy Toronado serious straight-line power. The 455 became a staple in this model for years, with various performance and emissions-tuned versions. The Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, yes, a station wagon with a Rocket 455. The Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, best known for its signature panoramic glass roof, may have looked like your average family hauler, but it quietly became one of the quirkiest muscle-era sleepers out there. Why? Because some enthusiasts and even Oldsmobile itself decided to drop in the legendary Rocket 455 V8. Originally, the first-generation Vista Cruiser, launched in the mid-60s, came with a 330 cubic inch V8 producing between 200 and 300 horsepower. That was more than enough for a full-size family car at the time. But when the second generation debuted in 1968, things got a lot more interesting. Oldsmobile expanded the engine options, offering buyers a range of 400 and 455 cubic inch V8s. With a 455 under the hood, the Vista Cruiser transformed from a family wagon into something resembling a 442 muscle car, but with room for the kids, the dog, and your weekend camping gear. GMC's 455 V8 motorhome. Here's something you might not expect. The legendary Rocket 455 V8 wasn't just reserved for muscle cars. It also found a surprising home in one of the most unique recreational vehicles ever built, the GMC Motorhome. Produced between 1973 and 1978 by the GMC Truck and Coach Division in Pontiac, Michigan, the GMC Motorhome was a bold departure from the industry norm. Unlike most RVs of the era, which were essentially boxy cabins bolted onto chassis supplied by other manufacturers, GMC designed, engineered, and built the entire vehicle in-house, including the body, drivetrain, and in many cases, the interior. While many were factory finished by GMC, some units were sold as empty shells to other RV manufacturers, who added custom interiors. Others were transformed into specialty vehicles, mobile training centers, postal delivery vans, ambulances, and even airport people movers. In every form, the GMC Motorhome was a bold experiment that proved the Rocket 455 wasn't just for performance. It could power an entire home on wheels. But for all its greatness, there was one thing even the Rocket 455 couldn't outrun: corporate politics. Act 3. GM bans, politics, and scandal. For a few shining years, the Rocket 455 made Oldsmobile more than just relevant. It made them dangerous. They were winning performance shootouts. They were building the most versatile engine in the GM lineup, and customers were responding. But that success came with a price. Inside General Motors, there was a war brewing. Oldsmobile popularity in cars created a problem for the division in the late 1970s. Let's rewind to understand why. In the late 1960s and early 70s, each GM division built its own engines. Chevy, Pontiac, Buick, and Oldsmobile all produced a unique 350 cubic inch displacement V8. This was fine until Oldsmobile's 455 started outperforming engines from Chevy and Pontiac. Chevrolet was supposed to be the performance division. Pontiac had carved out their niche with the GTO. But suddenly, Oldsmobile, the luxury conservative brand, was building engines that were triumphing over everyone else in the GM family. The 455 wasn't just beating Ford and Chrysler engines. It was making Chevrolet's vaunted big blocks look outdated. Internal GM testing showed the W3455 consistently outperforming the legendary LS6454. This was a problem. Worse yet, GM began to see Oldsmobile's rising popularity as a threat to brand hierarchy. And instead of supporting that success, they did what large corporations too often do. They tried to water it down. By the late 70s, Oldsmobile was riding high. Their sales were booming. Models like the Cutlass were topping the charts. But they had a problem. They couldn't build enough Rocket V8s to meet demand. Demand even exceeded production capacity for the Oldsmobile V8. So, GM made a decision that would ultimately blow up in their faces. They began installing Chevrolet 350 engines in Oldsmobiles without telling customers. Although there were debates on the difference in quality or performance between the two engines, there was no question that the engines were different from one another. The result? Public relations nightmares for GM buyers expecting the smooth, torquey feel of a Rocket V8 were getting small block Chevys instead. Some noticed instantly, while others discovered it during service. Either way, it caused a storm of lawsuits, press backlash, and worst of all, a collapse in trust. This scandal, known as the Chevy-mobile controversy, shattered Oldsmobile's engine identity. And even though GM had tried to argue that a V8 is a V8, enthusiasts and loyalists knew better. They didn't just want horsepower, they wanted their Rocket 455 engine. And just like that, the Rocket engine was slowly losing its unique identity, even among enthusiasts. But Oldsmobile's frustration didn't start with the engine swap scandal. It started long before, in 1963, when GM issued a now infamous corporate directive. On the cusp of the golden age of American muscle, GM forbade all of its divisions from participating in racing, including development. They instituted a corporate policy limiting engine size in intermediate cars to 400 cubic inches. What this meant for GM muscle cars is that they couldn't compete with Mopar 446 packs and 426 Street Hemis. Oldsmobile found a way around this draconian engine ban by partnering with Hearst Performance to produce a limited edition car known as the Hearst Olds in 1968. Because of GM's engine ban, these cars were supposed to be shipped to Hearst without engines and transmissions, but the reality is that the drivetrains were factory installed. The Hustolds were powered by the 390 horsepower version of the Rocket 455, which of course came with those 500 amazing pound-feet of torque. This engine was mated to a turbo-hydromatic 400 transmission with a Hurst dual-gate shifter that allowed for automatic or ratcheted manual shifting. Only 515 1968 Hurst Olds cars were produced, making them super rare collectibles. It was a clever loophole that gave the Rocket 455 the platform it deserved, but it also showed just how far Olds had to go to fight against its own parent company. The slow death of a giant. Among hot rodders and serious builders, though, the Rocket 455 developed a loyal cult following. People who owned W3044-2s or swapped 455s into other cars often spoke of the engine's effortless power. But none of this could stop its potential doom. Once the crown jewel of GM's hidden powerhouse division, the Rocket 455 quietly slipped out of the spotlight in the early 1970s. And not because it wasn't good enough. In fact, it was more than good. It was brilliant, but brilliance wasn't enough to protect it from the storm that had brewed over the muscle car industry. By 1971, the golden age of American muscle was starting to crumble under pressure. Federal emission standards, rising insurance costs, and the growing fuel crisis began to squeeze the life out of big displacement performance. Even the mighty W30 package, once a symbol of untamed power, was softened. Compression ratios dropped from a thunderous 10.5 to 1 to a tame 8.5 to 1. Camshafts were dialed back, engine tuning was neutered, and the once world-beating torque began to shrink. The Rocket 455, now making a still respectable 350 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque, was no longer the king of the hill. And those were gross numbers. By the time SAE net ratings came into effect, things looked even bleaker, and with the confusion from the engine swap scandal, plus rising production costs, GM made the call to kill the Rocket. And just like that, the engine that could have redefined Oldsmobile was gone, not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well in a system designed to keep divisions in their place. And that's what makes the Rocket 455 story so frustrating, because Oldsmobile had it. They had the engine, the one that could have rewritten the book on American performance, the one that proved innovation didn't need to shout to be heard. But it got buried under bureaucracy, shelved in favor of safer, cheaper, more market-friendly options. So while the world chased 427 Chevelles, 426 Hemis, and Boss 429s, the Rocket 455 became one of the greatest what-ifs in muscle car history. Act 4, the rebirth, modern relevance, and builds. Today, something interesting is happening. Decades after its official retirement, the Rocket 455 is experiencing a quiet but steady rebirth. The Oldsmobile 455 is making a comeback, and not just as a collector's curiosity, but as a legitimate performance engine for builders, customizers, and weekend warriors who want more than just what's popular. In the world of modern engine swaps, the Rocket 455 is still a surprisingly competitive option. Thanks to its broad availability, due to Oldsmobile's long production run, you can often find a usable 455 core for far less than an LS3 or Gen V Hemi. With a wide production run across cars like the 442, Toronado, Cutlass Supreme, Delta 88, and even wagons, the 455 block is surprisingly easy to find, and for those willing to put in the work, it rewards you generously. And unlike some collector cars that have been pampered their whole lives, 455-powered Oldsmobiles were usually driven hard, used often, and built tough. That gives them a kind of rugged authenticity that's rare in today's overly polished car scene. But beyond the performance specs, beyond the builds and the dyno sheets, the Rocket 455 stands for something deeper. It's a symbol of what could have been. It reminds us that innovation sometimes comes from the places we least expect, that greatness doesn't always wear a badge with hype behind it. Sometimes the underdog builds something so pure, so capable, and so ahead of its time that the only explanation for its downfall is politics, not performance. The Rocket 455 wasn't just an engine, it was a statement. It told the world that Oldsmobile had a voice, that they could compete with the best, that they could go toe-to-toe with Chevrolet, Ford, Plymouth, and Pontiac and win. But like many great stories in history, it faded. It didn't get the send-off it deserved. It wasn't given a hero's farewell. It was simply phased out, replaced, and eventually forgotten by all but the most loyal enthusiasts. For older enthusiasts, the 455 is a trip back to a better time. For younger builders, it's a chance to own something unique and to build a sleeper or a street beast that breaks the mold. And for collectors, it's a reminder that Oldsmobile didn't just play the game, they built an engine that should have rewritten the rules. The Rocket 455 may not have gotten its moment in the sun like it should have, but maybe that's what makes it special, because while the spotlight moved on, the engine kept working, performing, and earning its reputation the hard way. And today, more and more enthusiasts are remembering what the magazines forgot. Sometimes the best muscle car engine isn't the one that makes the most noise. It's the one that did the most work, even if quietly. So the next time you see an old Oldsmobile, maybe a 442, maybe a Toronado, or even a rusty Cutlass in someone's backyard, take a second look. You might be staring at one of the last great chapters in American muscle car history. What do you think? Should the 455 be remembered alongside the legendary big blocks? Have you ever experienced the brutal torque of a W3455? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed diving deep into automotive history's forgotten gems, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories from the golden age of American muscle.